morning and Assalamu alaikum. We're at the Breathe Pakistan, the Air We Breathe conference, and we've heard policymakers, government representatives, civil society talk about the very serious issue of poor air quality, especially in Lahore, but Punjab and the country as a whole. Joining me right now is Senior Puisne Judge of the Supreme Court, Justice Mansoor Shah. And given that the judiciary, especially Pakistan, is a very unique country where judiciary had to come ahead, do a lot of driving for environmental policy. And the Smog Commission is a key example of that the judiciary took notice, developed this commission, issued policy recommendations, and that's actually when Punjab really initiated monitoring and policy development. What do you think that the role of the judiciary is already very unique? How else do you see judiciary can drive the conversation forward?
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me over. I think the judiciary over the last 2 or 3 decades has been doing a lot. They've been robustly interfering into the matter, pushing and nudging the government to find solutions to air pollution, climate change, and whatnot. But talking about air pollution, I remember that in '97, I was a lawyer then, I took the first case to the High Court about the air pollution, the state of air pollution in Lahore. And it took 9 years for that court case to get decided. And finally, there were directions given to get rid of two-stroke rickshaws, to improve the fuel quality, and a number of other directions, and to get rid of the buses, the old buses that were plying in the city, and to move on to CNG buses and all that. So some successes took place at that time, but largely after the case was decided, things just, the government relaxed and nothing happened. And 30 years from then, there was a case that came to the Supreme Court regarding stone crushers units who were polluting air. And we're back to square one, and it's surprising that something we started in '97, we got directions from the court, and 30 years later, we're still at the same spot. So it appears that there is a huge disconnect between what we write and what the actualization of that judgment by the government. So to my mind, there's a huge governance failure throughout, and these decisions, which are now hailed all over internationally, are decorative to my mind, and they just are nice words, but they don't get translated on the ground, and there's a huge gap, and that disturbs me. So as far as judiciary is concerned, we've been working on it. I think over the years, it started off with a couple of judges looking at environment. Now a large corpus of judges look at environment. They understand climate also. So we're doing okay. It's just that there's no connection between what we say and what the government does. Let me quickly add that in 2017, we had the first the law regarding climate change. The Climate Change Act came around in 2017, talks about an authority, the apex authority in the country that has to address climate change in the country. There is no authority till date. And the Supreme Court directed recently to go form an authority, and it's been a year and they don't constitute an authority, one. It talks about something very important. The law talks about green fund, or a climate change fund, and there is not a penny in that fund. So how do you address the flood situation of 2022, 2025? Is there a budget allocation for air pollution? I don't know. So I mean, the disconnect is rather disturbing, and so judiciary could, we cannot fix air pollution, we cannot fix climate change. We could simply lay down a policy, push the government in that direction, jumpstart few things, but then the government will have to take over, which is not happening, exactly.
I think your mention of how the political caucus of judges that has grown and is concerned with the environment, I believe it's also called the Green Bench, has been people concerned, and because the discussion on judicial activism is closely related to on-ground activism as well. I know a lot of young lawyers, because they're young, they experience air pollution and climate issues. They go to the courts, especially after Article 9A, given that clean air, good environment, protection from climate impacts is now a constitutional right. There have been petitions in Lahore High Court, there have been petitions in Islamabad High Court, young kids gone to the court to simply say that these vehicles on the road are polluting. and no one seems to stop them, which is your point about how on ground does nothing changes. What would you recommend, this new cohort of green lawyers concerned about the environment, how do they really ensure that they can make an on-ground impact?
So I think the cohort has to increase. I mean, you're talking about 250 million people, and 10 lawyers is not enough, not a cohort at all. I think there have to be a lot more lawyers looking into this area, but more importantly, the civil society. Where is the civil society? I mean, look at India, look at any other country. The civil society actively pursues the matter. They come to the court, they ensure that they sit through the public interest litigation and take it to a conclusion. We don't see any public interest litigation coming our way. Where are the people? And if they're going to sit at home and just crib about air pollution, crib about climate, nothing's going to change. So they need to really forcefully come to court, monitor the cases, and I think a lot more public interest litigation ought to come to the court, which if you look at the entire population, I think it's just a minuscule, a fraction coming to court, and I think more lawyers need to be trained in this, but more judges ought to be trained in this also. The training and the capacity is important, but I think civil society along with the government have a role to play, and because we can't just run the country on commissions. You mentioned smog commission earlier. In 2017, a smog case comes to the High Court, and I think the AQI at that time was 400 or so, and it was very unhealthy, and we declared a health emergency at that time under a particular law of the 1944. There's a law where you can create, where you can sort of announce a emergency in the country, and we did that. And we came up with a smog commission, and we gave recommendations on how to address this smog through consensus with the government, but nothing got implemented again. So the smog commissions are not working, the climate change commissions are kind of dying away, nothing happens. So I think a consistent civil society input is required, and I really would want the government to really get serious about this, because they can't just keep putting posters all over the country. They need to actually do something in real and change state of affairs, because look at your air pollution. My granddaughter is unwell. She's unwell because she can't go out and play with her friends in the garden. Why is that? I mean, somebody is responsible, and we need to do that. We need to do something about it, and I think it's serious.
With that thought in mind, even though it's not a very positive thought, it's the reality, we will end our conversation and stay tuned for more.